Hello, it's me, Mike, with HPDS. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who is in heaven, hallowed be thy name. May your kingdom come, and may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Please give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our debt, as we forgive those in debt to us. And Lord, lead us not into temptation, but rather deliver us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom of power and glory, Lord, forever and ever. Amen. So today I'm going to go ahead and start with a Genesis 14 Bible study. And I'm going to go ahead and start how I have been starting with, I've been making these little video game presentations. So I'm going to go ahead and show that, and then I'll read through Genesis 14, and then I'll discuss it, I suppose. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Here you'll see my little, here we go, I'm gonna go ahead and just read it. And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All these were joined together in the vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. It's Genesis 14, 1 through 3. So it goes on and it says, hello there, let's review Genesis chapter 14. Chapter 14 tells of a great war in the land of Canaan. Verses 1 through 3 tells of an invading force from the land of Shinar. 4 kings invade Canaan and defeat 5 local kings. Verse 3 mentions that the war comes to a head in the vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. Let's take a look at the map, to see the geography of the chapter. Here you can see this land of Shinar, which is Nimrod's kingdom. Genesis 14:1 calls Amraphel the king of Shinar. The land of Shinar is also known as Babylon. Recall from Genesis 10 that this is part of the kingdom that Nimrod had established. Babylonia is what I meant. Genesis 10:10 says of Nimrod, in the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. So you can see all of that, the land of Shinar. There's Akkad. There's Babel somewhere right here. Where's Babel? I don't remember what Babel is. Calneh, I don't really see what Calneh is. But there's Erech. So you can see this is all, I think this is where, I forget what country that is today. But I'll keep going. These 4 kings from Shinar probably traveled northwest along the Euphrates River and southward through the land of Canaan. So up through this and down here. This would have been a very similar path that Abram himself took throughout chapters 11 and 12 of Genesis. Their targets were the 5 kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar. Ultimately, this invading army, comprised of 4 kings from Shinar, end up in the vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. Genesis 14:4 informs us that 5 Canaanite kings served Chedorlaomer for 12 years. However, they rebel in the 13th year. Then Genesis 14:5 through 7 reads, and in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaims in Ashtaroth Karnaim, and the Zuzims in Ham, and the Emins in Shavah Kiriathaim, and the Horites in their Mount Seir, which is all this, Seir unto Elparan, which is by the wilderness. Elparan is down here. So you can see this purple line coming where they come right here. The Rephaims in Ashtaroth Karaim, and then they beat the Zuzims in Ham, which is right here. This map's a little hard to see, so I'll pull it out later. Again, Kirathim right here. They beat the Emites in Kirathim, and then they go all the way down to beat the Horites in their Mount Seir, which unto El Paran, which is El Paran right here. So here's that Mount Seir. So they come quite a bit of a distance, and then we're gonna see that they come back around, and they returned and came to Mishpat, which is Kadesh right here, and smote all the country of the Amalekites and also the Amorites. So the Amalekites and the Amorites are right up in here, that dwelt in Hazon Tamar. Oh, here are the Amorites in Tamar right here. So they come up here, come right here, and then this map shows the mentioned movement of the invading kings during this 14th year, as well as the subsequent events. Again, the 5 local Canaanite kings go out to defend their territory, as written in Genesis 14, 8 through 9. And there went out the king of Sodom, which is right up here, Sodom and Gomorrah, and the king of Gomorrah. So, and there went out the king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela. The same is Zoar. And they joined battle with them in the Vale of Siddim. So these cities or something right here come out and they try to defend it. With Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and with Tidal, king of nations, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar. So that's 4 kings with 5. So we got 4 kings versus 5 kings. Reading on, verses 10 through 11 tells that the defense was unsuccessful, and the Vale of Siddim was full of slime pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, and fell there, and they that remained fled to the mountain. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah, and all their victuals, and went their way. So you can see them, they took it, and they left on their way. However, Chedorlaomer's forces made a giant mistake, and this mistake is explained in verses 12 through 14, and it reads as, And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. And there came one that had escaped, and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshol, the brother of Anar. And these were confederate with Abram, so he was living in a town called Hebron right here. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. And Dan is way up here. So he goes all the way up to Dan. And, so this little guy says, Now for some reason people will defend science vehemently in modern culture, yet the same defense is not made of these valuable historical records of a powerful modern country that is only recently being reestablished in the last 75 years from the making of this presentation. In fact, on a personal note, I have found that many people take history for beliefs. Science is often a hard fact, while history is something that anyone can choose to believe or not. I digress, but not before mentioning that the Bible is entirely factual and establishing it as the most important legal document in existence, hence the vast study of its content. So I just want to point that out. People do think that history, they call the Bible fiction or fairy tales and stuff like that. Say Jesus is a figment of my imagination, but the Bible is full of historical records, and look at this. This is what happened. These guys came in, invaded, they took off, and then there's this guy, Abram, that chased after them, and this was something like, close to 4,000 years ago or so. So remember from chapters 12 and 13 that Abram was very wealthy at this point in history. And so here goes chapter, and Abram was very rich in cattle and silver and in gold. And that comes from Genesis 13:2. Upon hearing that Lot had been taken captive, Abram was able to gather 318 soldiers to pursue the invading forces. What Abram did next was truly the act of a noble man. And so verse 15 of Genesis 14 reads, And he divided himself against them, he and his servants, by night, and smote them, and pursued them unto Hobath, which is on the left hand of Damascus. You can see it right there, Hobath. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. Genesis 14:15 through 16. Abram, with the help of God, saved the local population that had been taken captive by the invading army. So while the local kings and military men hid in the mountains after their defeat, Abram was in hot pursuit. And upon Abram's return, a great meeting takes place between several kings. So the remainder of Genesis 14, which is verses 17 through 24, reads, And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer, and of the kings that were with him at the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's dale. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High. So this is Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abraham of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, Give me the persons, and take the goods to thyself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich, save only that which the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men which went with me, Aner, Eshol, and Mamre. Let them take their portion. The king of Salem, Melchizedek, blesses Abram as well as the Most High God. Salem, of course, is now known as Jerusalem. Again, these are historical records, not fairy tales or beliefs. Melchizedek is a very mysterious king, and first mentioned in the Bible in this verse, which is Genesis 14:18, as it is written to the Hebrews after the revealing of Jesus Christ in Hebrews 7:1 through 3. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abram returning from the slaughter of the kings, and blessed him, to whom also Abram gave a 10th part of all, first being by interpretation king of righteousness, and after that also king of Salem, which is king of peace, without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. So of course there's much that can be said of Melchizedek. For example, he brings forth the bread and wine, which is, an allusion to Jesus Christ in the future, and was already known to be the priest of the Most High God. He was the king of righteousness and the king of peace. And Abram gives a 10th of all he had to this mysterious king and priest of the Most High God. Abram was the hero here, but he attributes his victory to the Most High God, which is extremely important, as we'll see later on as we study Melchizedek. But Melchizedek as king and priest would have commanded much respect and attention at the time. His words, commands, discernments, knowledge, goods, and much more would have been very valuable, and his legal authority would have been absolute. Later on, we will be told of his great powers as well. Sodom and Gomorrah would be made famous examples, and their kings would be shown as absolute failures. So that's the end of this little presentation. I'm going to go ahead and X out of that and bring up, here you go. So now I'm into Genesis 14. Let me go ahead and read through that. Let's see, let me bring it up. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and read through it like I said. And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, entitled King of Nations, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All these were joined together in the vale of Siddim, which is the salt sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaims in Ashtaroth, Karnaim, and the Zuzims in Ham, and the Emims in Shaveh Kirathaim, and the Horites in their Mount Seir, unto El Paran, which is by the wilderness. And they returned and came to Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites that dwelt in Hazezontamar. And there went out the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, the same is Zoar, and they joined battle with them in the vale of Siddim, with Chedorlaomer the king of Elam, and with Tidal king of nations, and Amraphel king of Shinar, and Arioch king of Elasar, 4 kings with 5. And the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits. And the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, and fell there. And they that remained fled to the mountain. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah, and all their victuals, and went their way. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. And there came one that had escaped, and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, the brother of Aner. And these were confederate with Abram. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. And he divided himself against them, he and his servants, by night, and smote them, and pursued them unto Hobah, which is on the left hand of Damascus. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer, and of the kings that were with him in the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's dale. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abraham of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, Give me the persons, and take the goods to thyself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich, save only that which the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men which went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their portion. So that's Genesis 14 of the King James Version in its entirety. And as we'll see, let me go ahead and pick up those pictures again. Let's see. This one is a pretty good. This is a picture we were actually looking at. So that's one of them. And I'll grab one more, which is probably the same map, but a little bit nicer looking. Yeah, so it comes that there is let's see, here's the king land of Shinar, and you can see Jerusalem is way down here, so these are where the invading armies come from. You can see the king of Elam, this is the land of Shinar. I think one of these is they're not always the same. Elasar, for example, Elam, and King of Nations. So it's kind of a big army force, and I think title is maybe like a title, and not really like a particular name, but maybe like a title that he's the general. Maybe he's the King of Nations, and Chedorlaomer appears to be the strongest king because that's who they end up serving. If you notice. It says they served him, Chedorlaomer, even though they call Amraphel king of Shinar. So Amraphel is just a king from Shinar, apparently, or the line of Shinar. But this other place, Elam, is right over here, and he seems to be the big king. And then title King of Nations is probably like a confederacy, or like I said, a general of these people. And they come all the way, they must have traveled up the Euphrates and then somehow come, right around here or somewhere around here, and come in through Damascus. And you'll see, like we said, if you take a look at this map, they come in, here's Damascus is up here, Haran. And so these guys do come down. Where's this other map? You can see this purple one right here. This purple is where they come from, and they attack right here. They kill the Rephaim, the Zuzites, the Emites, and they come down to this, wherever this was, El Paran, and they come up to En Mishpat and Tamar over here, and they smote the Amalekites and the Amorites, and that's where we're coming. But then we see that Hebron, if you notice right there, Hebron and Shalom, that's where King Melchizedek blesses Abraham. So this is the first time, like I said, the first time we come across Melchizedek in the Bible, and they just name it. And Melchizedek, if you remember, was not mentioned at all in Genesis chapter 10. So in Genesis chapter 10 comes around, Genesis 10 tells us a lot of the names of the after the sons of Japheth, the sons of Ham, and of course the sons of Shem. So we learn all the sons of Noah's and all their children's, but Melchizedek is not once mentioned there. So that's why later on in Hebrews 7, 1 through 3, as I read in that, Melchizedek is called the King of Righteousness. That's what his name means. Melchizedek is the King of Righteousness. And then Shalom, I guess, Salem, from Jerusalem, is peace. So he's both the King of Righteousness and the King of Peace. And that's gonna make a difference coming up in chapter 15 when Abram actually has a vision from this very same guy. And so a lot of people will tell you that Melchizedek was Shem, because Shem was really old at this point in time, and Shem would have appeared as a man without beginning, without mother or father, because he would have been so old. Shem lived to be something like I want to say 500 years old or something. I don't remember how old he was, but and as we go through, remember chapter 12, or was it chapter 11? Let's see, I think it was chapter 11. Yeah, chapter 11, we start seeing how early these people start dying. So in 119, and so let's see what it says. They were trying to, this is chapter 11, it talks about the Tower of Babel, obviously. And these guys were living for a really long time. Once again, 403 years. But they were growing, they were living shorter and shorter lifespans. So some people want to say that this Melchizedek was Shem, and Shem was living in Salem, because it sounds like his name or whatever, but that's not the case. Melchizedek is this hidden man, if you remember from chapter 2. He's the king and priest of the Most High. And he had some he was able to do anything. And we'll see that in chapter 15, how Melchizedek, as King of Righteousness, introduces himself to Abraham in a vision. But right here, he actually meets him in person. So after Abram hears that they took off with they took off with his nephew Abram over here. Abram, they took off with Lot, his nephew Lot. Abram hears about it, and that's what he does. He gets 318 guys, 318 of his own soldiers, because he was pretty rich at this point. He had a big military. And this is another thing you got to keep in mind. He was living in a time of giants. If you remember, it said that Nimrod in chapter 10 became a mighty man, and he was the mighty men of old. And so they were really doing some crazy things back then. And there were giants, and there were giants in the land of Canaan as well, that we will learn later on, that the Amalekites and those guys were big giants. Some of these guys are giants. So like when Joshua goes in, something like 400, 500 years later or so, when Moses and them are leaving Egypt and they go in to check out the promised land. I mean, Joshua himself says that they go up there and they find that these people were like they look like grasshoppers in their eyes, and that's how big they were. They were giants. So Abram probably was living with giants. He was living with the Canaanites. He was an immigrant with the Canaanites. And there was also a king there named Melchizedek living in Salem, and he was extraordinarily powerful. But then there was also these other kings that we see that were, quite honestly, they were wannabe kings. King of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, and they get made. Sodom and Gomorrah are made famous examples coming up in a few more chapters as well. And that's another thing. We'll see the Lord come out, and he comes out in person to visit Abram, and he's got some angels that go with him to go destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And meanwhile, that's Melchizedek. You got Melchizedek. So people a lot of times don't, they're always wondering, well, how did they see God in person? Well, he was this guy named Melchizedek. He had no beginning. He was, had no descent. He was that secret man built, before he was before all days. He was made before the days. That's what he was. He was, you find him in Genesis 2, first showing up, but he's only named here in Genesis 14, verse 18, Melchizedek. And he blesses him. He blesses Abraham. And Abraham obviously knows that this guy was somehow leading him. He was giving, so he was giving him instructions or whatever, or, because you'll see in chapter 15 that Abram gets a vision from the king of righteousness. He counts it as righteousness. But let's see, Abram obviously knows and he can tell that Melchizedek was somebody huge and important. And when he blesses him, he obviously makes an oath that says, he had some sort of a conversation, and he knew that the king of Sodom over here was, the king of Sodom was a bad guy. He wasn't very good. I mean, he had just lost, and he lost a military battle, and like cowards, they go flee and hide in the mountains. And this other guy who wasn't even a king, because Abram was not a king. Abram wasn't a king. He was just a rich guy, a rich man blessed by the Lord, and he has to go save the day. And he goes and he picks it up. He kills him. It tells him right here. It says that, what does it say? He divided himself against them, he and his servants, by night, and smote them. So that means he was doing some real, intense maneuvers. He was doing it. He was going in there and doing some warfare, some smart warfare. Not this, nonsense where they were just fighting for the sake of fighting. He was very smart about it, and he goes about it by night. And that would have been God teaching him. God was teaching him how to, go through warfare, and how he was teaching him about warfare. And of course, he saves everybody. He gets blessed by this king, and he tells these other false kings, these lower kings of Sodom and Gomorrah and all that, and he says, you know what? Because they were offering them. That's what the king of Sodom comes and tells them. Just give me the people, but go ahead and take all the goods for yourself, is what the king of Sodom was saying. Like as a thanks, like, thank you for saving us. Just give me the persons, but, go ahead and take the goods. And that's why Abram even tells them, you know what? I'm not even going to take your goods. I saved your people. And I don't need anything from you. And he goes, I'm not even going to take a shoelace from you, is what this is basically saying. Because if I did, knowing the kind of man that the king of Sodom was, he knew that he would have said, or else you might say that Abram made, that you made Abram rich. But it wasn't you that made Abram rich. He's trying to tell him that God made me rich. Abram was telling the king of Sodom, you will never make me rich. God made me rich. I don't even need your stuff. I went out and saved you like a king because That's what righteous people do. And that's why he says basically just whatever we've eaten, whatever the people eaten, and then there's a few lower guys, a few of my generals who are nobodies, they're beneath Abram. And he says, let them go ahead and take whatever portion you are going to give them. Go ahead and give them some stuff, but me, I don't need nothing from you. That's what Abram said. And he says that because he had raised his hand. He goes, I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord. So he had made like a vow to God. So God must have said, God probably told him that king of, Melchizedek. Melchizedek must have told him, hey, when you go out there, the king of Sodom's gonna offer you some things, but don't take any of his things, because I will give you things later on. And so, yeah, this is Melchizedek, the introduction of Melchizedek. And he's only mentioned a few times in the Bible, but technically he's going to always be there from now on because he is the king of righteousness. But this was very early on in the history of the Abrahamic people, the Jews, the Israelites, the Hebrews, their various names. But this is the beginning, and they had not yet quite understood. And Melchizedek, right here, and God, the Lord, he was taking it upon himself to start showing the people of the world through Abram. And he's going to promise Abram, he's going to make a promise later on about, multiplying his seed, and he doesn't, things like that, which we'll see. But this is just Genesis 14, and Melchizedek is first mentioned, and Abram is shown to be acting like a very good king. Even though he wasn't a king, he was acting like a king, like a very noble man, and he was able to arm his household. He was able to do righteous things, and he was able to do it for free. He didn't need anybody else's money. God gave him wealth. And that's what, and God credits him with faith, and it's with faith that God gave him these things because of his faith. And I guess that's really all I'm going to say about this for right now. It's chapter 14 of Genesis. And I'll go ahead and get started with the next portions of Genesis. So I just want to go ahead and end this video by saying, pray we all bless Jesus Christ, and may he bless all of us. Amen.